Everybody, thanks for watching. Now, this is another video I've been wanting to do for a while now. I get a lot of questions about race. You know, where did the many races come from? Where did the white people come from? Where did the Asians come from? Now, I understand the history that has existed between black people and white people, and unfortunately, when black people look back at black history, we find the terrible things that have been done to us by the white race, by the Arabs. Now, do I blame the white people of today for slavery? No, I do not. Do I blame the white people of today for what has happened to black people? No, I do not. Now, I understand that the white people of today has greatly benefited from the actions of their ancestors, and there are many white people who will admit just that. Now, we have to understand the many lies that has been told to the races of people around the world. We need to understand that the rich and small are trying to control the poor and many. We need to understand the lies that have been told to us about race, about history, that keeps us separated. We have been put in a system of divide and conquer, and because a lot of people are ignorant of history and ignorant of the facts, you know, we have been controlled. You know, you have black people versus white people. We have all these racial issues going on in America right now, all this racial tension. And if we look at who is dishing out this tension, we can see who the real enemy is. But because a lot of people don't understand history and don't understand what has been proven, you know, we got this whole negative atmosphere going on between, you know, black people and white people, Hispanics and what have you. So I want to shed some light on the history of the races, the proof, the genetics of where the many races come from, so we can understand that we are all not different. We are the same. We need to understand what is taking place and who is trying to divide and conquer us. Now, I understand there are going to be a lot of people who are not going to like this video. There's going to be many racist people who are not going to like what I'm going to show in this video, but I'm going to give you facts. I'm going to give you proof. I'm going to give you evidence. And at the end of the video, you will see clearly that what I'm trying to show you is the truth. You will see the clear truth, and there will be no denying it and no refuting it. Now, when we look at the origins of white people and Asians, there are basically two theories. There's a monogenetic theory and a polygenetic theory. Now, the monogenetic theory is basically saying that, you know, it's the out of Africa theory. Everybody came from African people. You know, the Africans gave birth to all races. Then you have the polygenetic theory, which is, of course, different, and there are other races of people involved. Now, the whole thing is, what are these other races? We know that there is a consensus around the world between all scientists that civilization began in Africa. So we're not going to argue that, because every scientist agrees that, you know, we came from Africa. Everybody did. Whether you want to accept that or not, we all come out of Africa. So let's look at this polygenetic theory. And the whole polygenetic theory involves the Africans in Africa, and then you have the Neanderthals, and you have the Denisovans. Now, scientists are not exactly 100% clear on where the Neanderthals came from. Now, we know Neanderthal bones go back at least 100,000, 200,000 years. We know Homo sapien bones go back at least 400,000 years and further, and Homo erectus go back at least 300,000 years and further as well. Now, they figured that at some point, the Homo erectus mated with Homo sapien and gave rise to Neanderthal, and that the Denisovans is basically inbreeding that took place within the Neanderthals. Now, none of these theories are 100% concrete, but this is what they came up with. Now, when we look at the whole polygenetic theory, there's basically two theories within it that explains where the white race and the Asians came from. Now, one of the theories is that at some point, the Africans left out of Africa, crossed the Red Sea, crossed the Persian Gulf into Iran, and they split up. Now, once they split up, one group went into Europe and became the Neanderthals. The other group went far east and became the Denisovans. This is one of the theories. The second theory is that the Africans left Africa, went into Europe and Asia, and made it with Neanderthals and made it with the Denisovans and gave rise to the white race and the Asian race. Now, what is the problem with this model? The problem with this model is you can't take a black African, I'm talking about a black African, Kunta Kinte looking African, and mate him with this and get this. It's just not possible. There's no way that you can take a black African and mate him with anything and that African's traits not show up. We have dominant genes. If you mate black with anything, we will always show up. That's the way it's always been. Now understand, no matter how you slice it, whether you want to accept the monogenetic theory or the polygenetic theory, no matter how you look at it, you cannot get the white race or the Asian race without the Africans, period. So this makes the Africans the original man. Or as Dr. Anzac put it at Cornell University,
the Africans who came out from Africa have no evidence of any Neanderthal genes in them. No evidence of admixture. So they're the real pure humans. Homo sapiens. Really, really interesting, and it gives you a lot to think about.
So now understand, you can find traces of the Neanderthal DNA in the white race, in the Asian race, but not in the African race. There's no trace, there's no evidence of Neanderthals inside of Africans. But again, there's no way you can get this white man or this Asian from a black man mating with this Neanderthal by their definition, by their view of Neanderthal. It's just not possible. It would not look like this. So there has to be another explanation. There has to be something else that we have to look at. Now, when we look at the polygenetic theory, and when you look at the other theory of Africans coming out of Africa and turning into the Neanderthals, it makes more sense than Africans coming out of Africa and mating with the Neanderthals and the Denisovans. It doesn't make sense that you can take this black man and mix it with this Neanderthal and get this clean-cut white boy. It's not going to work. So now, Dr. Andre Mancia and Andres Eriksson of Cambridge University tackled this whole thing about the inbreeding between the Neanderthals and the Africans, and this is what they had to say. It says they began with an ancestral hominin population throughout Africa and Europe. Because of their regional proximity, the hominins in Europe had more genes in common with those of northern Africa than those of southern Africa. Africa and Europe then became genetically isolated from one another, perhaps triggered by changing climates, says Mancia. This allowed the Europeans to evolve into Neanderthals and the Africans to evolve into modern humans. Crucially, though, the modern humans in northern Africa retained genetic similarities with the Neanderthals that the southern Africans lacked. Northern Africans ultimately moved into Europe, but they didn't need to interbreed with the Neanderthals to share some genes in common with them. You cannot prove there was never any hybridization, says Mancia, but none of the evidence for hybridization is convincing. Now, there's something wrong with this model as well. You have to understand psychopathic racism. Now, I'm not going to say that these people are racist. I'm not going to say that everybody who does this research and comes out with this conclusion is a racist. But you have to understand there are going to be people who are not going to want to put the connection between black people and white people together. So they're going to always interject something in the middle, something to try to give separation between black and white instead of stating the facts. This is some of the things we're going to see as we go along in this video, but we will also come to the conclusion that everybody is largely in agreement on what I'm going to show you. So understand, Dr. Mancia and Dr. Eriksson are basically trying to give us two separate origin stories for the African race and for white people. They are saying that basically there was a separation between the Africans in North Africa and the Europeans in Europe. So these hominins that they are speaking of that was in Northern Africa and in Europe are these things, these ape-looking things. So understand, they are saying that an ice age or some kind of climate change separated them. So the Africans in North Africa stayed there and became the modern humans. And in Europe, these hominins became the Neanderthals. Now, the problem with this is we already know that Homo sapiens existed hundreds of thousands of years before the Neanderthals. And we know that they began in Africa. So no matter how you want to slice it, you still cannot get the white man without the African, period, point blank. No matter what they want to say, how they want to switch it up. And we're going to find out through this video that they switch it up a lot And they're trying to do everything they can to separate the race. They don't want to recognize where they come from. And when we look at the proof later on in this video, we're going to see that even this theory is, is completely wrong. So now, what is the truth? What is the origin of the white race and of the Asians? Now, if you read the book Civilization and Barbarism by Sheikh Anta Diop, I'm pretty sure I popped up on the screen before. You read this book, he goes into this as well. Now, scientists are in consensus, and most people agree that civilization, that life began in Africa. You're talking about in Kenya, Tanzania, Ethiopia, somewhere near the equator. Now, there are 3 different directions that people believe that the Africans went, that they went out and they split up. 3 different directions. Now, one way is a lot of people believe they crossed into Yemen, crossed the Red Sea into Yemen, then crossed through Saudi Arabia, crossed the Persian Gulf into Iran, and then split up. Another theory is that they went north in Africa and they crossed over through Egypt into, the Middle East and, split up somewhere there. So now in the book Civilization and Barbarism, Sheikh Anta Diop points out that he believes they left through Morocco. They crossed the Straits of Gibraltar into Europe, and then they split up there. Some kept going east and some stayed in Europe, and, they settled. Now understand, when we follow these Africans, they settle all across Europe into Asia. So we can find them, they set down, they settled, they set up civilizations, but then at some point a group of people got together and they left and they kept populating, they kept spreading across Europe and Asia. So now understand, these Africans who left Africa, who set out across Europe and across Asia, they will later give rise to many civilizations, to many tribes of people. So understand, we're talking about the indigenous people of Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and India. The whole Indus Valley civilization. These people come from Africa. So when you look at the Indus Valley civilization, we can find people in India. We can find the Andaman tribe. The Andaman tribe, we can find these people in these areas. So now when we look at these people, we can see that they are clearly Africans. You can clearly see the dark skin. We can clearly see where they originate from. So we're talking about the indigenous people of the Middle East, right here, the Indus Valley people, the Andaman tribe. Now, most of these people were wiped out later by the British. So now, most of the Andaman people are gone. The people who are left are known by a different name. They are called the Sentinelese. Now, these people are the descendants of the Andaman tribe. This is who they became. They are still in existence today. Now, what you are going to find as I go through this, and I'm explaining this because we have to realize that politics have come and politics change things. The worldview changed things. So these people are looked down upon today by their own people. These are the grandfathers. These are the originators, the indigenous people of India. And they are looked down upon in India because the worldview of black people is not a good view. So these people are looked down upon, and you're going to find the same across Asia and the Middle East. So now as we keep going further east, as we go into Thailand, we can find the Mani tribe. These are the indigenous people of Thailand. Look at these people. They are clearly from Africa. So when our ancestors were settling across Europe, across Asia, they populated many places. Look at these people. Look at the afro. Look at the hair. These are clearly African people. This is where your Thai people come from. They come from us, period. The proof is here. We don't even have to really do no DNA research. You can look and see for yourself. Look at these people. These are the indigenous people of Thailand. So as we keep going over in this region, we can still find our people. We can look at the Khmer Kingdom in Cambodia. We can look at the Kampa civilization in Vietnam. And we can look at the Malaya civilization in Indonesia. We can always find our people in this area. So when you look at the artifacts, when we look at the ruins, we can see that black faces all over the place. We know that Buddha was black. They worshiped Buddha once as a black god. Now, politics have come and changed Buddha into this white, pale-faced Buddha. But when you go into the museums in Thailand, you can see the black Buddha. When you look at the hair on the Buddha statue, we can clearly see that that is black hair. Look at the earlobes. We can see that is indicative of African tribes with the earlobes drooping and the big holes in the earlobes. You won't find me any Thai people who have these ears or has that hair, except for the indigenous people of Thailand who look like black people. We can see clearly they come from Africa. So now we know that they settled in Thailand. We can go over more towards the east, towards China. They gave rise to the Xia and Shang civilizations. When you look at these people, we can clearly see with these people in China the evidence of African people. Just look at these people. Look at the hair. Look at the facial features. We can see that these people are African people. Now take a look at these people here. These people are the San people in South Africa. They are African people. These people are not in China, but we can clearly see that they resemble Chinese people. We can clearly see the origins of Chinese people come from Africa. So when we go over into Japan and look at the Jomon and the Ainu people being the indigenous people of Japan who have been closely compared to the Andaman tribe of the Indus Valley. They look exactly alike. So we can see clearly in Japan, these people are also of African descent. Look at them. Look at the hair. These people would look like the same people, the San people in South Africa. These are the same people, the same characteristics. These are the indigenous people of Japan as well. Now, if we keep going over to Australia, everybody knows about the Aborigines. Everybody knows they are clearly of African descent. They have blonde hair, a lot of them. They have dark skin. These are African people. And we know how they have been treated in Australia. We're not going to get into all that. But we can clearly see that when we go across Europe, when we go across Asia and look at the indigenous people, that they are clearly of African descent. There's no way around it. The pictures don't lie. The facts don't lie. And these people, in a lot of cases, are still there today. So now let's get into the whole white race. Where did they come from? Now there are also different theories here, and I'm gonna go through two different theories. The other theories are too outrageous for me to even talk about. But there are two main theories here. Now one theory is the whole out of Africa theory. Now some people believe that the Africans, when they left Africa and they went north towards Europe, when they went towards Russia and Sweden and places in this area, that they got trapped in the Ice Age. They got trapped in the Ice Age that lasted between 20 and 40,000 years. And during this Ice Age, they lost the pigmentation, they lost the melanin in the skin because they wasn't being exposed to enough sun. They didn't get enough sun so that the melanin can reproduce itself, because melanin needs the sun to reproduce itself and to stay active. And we know without melanin, then you will be basically white. So they believe that this whole transformation happened during the Ice Age, where these black people, these Africans, got trapped and they had to live in caves, and that they didn't see the sun for hundreds of years in some cases, and they didn't get enough sun exposure, and that they somehow mutated or changed into the white race. This is one theory. Now, here's the problem with this whole theory. Human beings, black people, Africans, we are not ectotherms, meaning we have internal heats. We are endotherms. We have internal heat. Now, when we look at ectotherms like reptiles, reptiles, they need to feel the sun on the surface of their skin because they don't have any internal body heat. If they don't get that sun on their skin, they can't really warm up because they don't generate enough body heat. So we have seen in these National Geographic TV shows with snakes and reptiles that if they do not get enough sun exposure, they will basically die. A snake will just curl up and die if he does not get enough sun. Now, animals like polar bears and cheetahs, they have internal body heat. Polar bears can go and swim in that water because they body heat. They have a lot of fat and they generate a lot of body heat. Now, a cheetah can run so fast and generate so much body heat that it kills them. Imagine that you run so fast, you get so hot and you just die. They can run so fast, they can generate so much body heat that goes to their brain and they'll just pass out and die, by running and chasing an animal. This is why they stop sometimes when they chase them. They can't chase them but so far because they'll overheat and they'll die. Same thing with humans is we have internal body heat. We are endotherms. We have internal body heat, meaning that no matter how cold it gets, we can survive it. We can live through it up to a point. As long as we take care of ourselves and we wrap up and, we're not exposed to, really cold winds and, frigid temperatures, we can basically survive in the cold. Now, when we look at the Eskimos, and they have lived in the cold for thousands of years, and they are basically brown-skinned people, and they never turn white. So a lot of scientists look at it and see that we are endothermic, and that is enough. We generate enough heat to basically protect our melanin. So I hate to say it like this, but urine is warm. Fecal matter is warm. You know, you piss hot, you poop hot. It's warm. When you blow your breath on the back of your hand, it's warm. When you are in cold weather and you blow out, you see the smoke because we are internally warm. So this should be enough to keep our melanin regenerating. Now, the thing is, when you look around the world, there are many different places that have frigid cold temperatures where people live, you know, like Eskimos. There are places that only get, you know, a week without snow. It's always constantly snowing, and there are people who live there. And some of these people come outside with no clothes on or minimal clothes, but they never turn white. They stay brown. A lot of these Eskimos have brown skin. They don't lose any real pigmentation in the skin. So, you know, what else is going on? There's something else here. So we can look at this model and see that it has flaws, and that, you know, because we are endothermic, we should be fine. So now, while I'm on the subject of, you know, the cold and cold places, this is going to give me an opportunity to get into the north of Europe, you know, places like Sweden, where I'm at now, and Russia, and Norway, and Finland, and places like this. You know, who are the indigenous people of these places? And we look at the Sami, or the Sami people that are in northern Finland, northern Sweden, northern Russia, northern Norway. These people are the indigenous people of these lands of northern Europe. This is where your Russian people come from, your Swedish people. These are the indigenous people of this place. And the whole thing is this. When we look at the oldest pictures of the Sami people, they look like this. These people look closer. They look more Mongoloid or more Asian. They look more Asian, like the people we find down in the Indus Valley, like the people we find over in China and the Sand people. They look more like these people, you know, back in the 1900s. This picture is from the 1900s. This is what they look like. So now what happened was, once the white people came, they started to go into the Sami territory and take over. Not at first. At first, they started to, you know, interbreed in there and live with them, and everything was peaceful. But later on, the late 1800s into the 1900s, they began to take over the lands. They began to invade and wipe out a lot of the indigenous, the original Sami people. So it went from them looking like this to today they look like this. Now, most of these people are a product of breeding with the original Sami people. So you have like a mix between these Mongoloid or these Asian looking Sami people and the white people, and you produce this. But these people today are protected. Now, for a long time, they've been fighting to get protection because they are almost gone. There's not many of them left that you'll find today that still look Asian. Most of them you'll see today look like this. They look like white people. Now here in Sweden, we call them like Laplanders. It's called Lapland. Now we have Laplanders in Lapland. They own a whole lot of Sweden. They own a whole lot of land here. These people are protected people, and they are well respected by the Swedish people. Now, they protect the Sami people today. Russia protects them. Finland protects them. Sweden. Everybody got together and they protect these people today. Well, they have to because they're almost gone. And you have this, you know, this mixture of this white man and the indigenous original people of northern Sweden and Russia today. They are all protected today. But this is where these people come from. Now we can look at these people back then and we can trace them back to Africa and see that originally these people were black people, just like in China, just like in Asia, and they come from Africa. Now, the second theory is the one that most scientists agree with today. They didn't always agree with this theory because of racism and politics, and I'll explain that later. Now, this is the one that I personally agree with as well. And if you're not convinced after I say it, then I will convince you. Trust me, you'll be convinced when this video is over. So now, the thing is, some scholars believe that when the Africans left Africa and headed to northern Europe, headed towards these areas like Finland and stuff like that, that they did get trapped in this ice age. But they did not immediately turn white, you know, after years and years of non-exposure to the sun and, you know, exposure to the frigid temperature. They didn't immediately turn white. That at some point, genetic deficiency was produced. And it was produced in everybody who had to live through this ice age, everybody who survived in it, that was in this area, in these really cold, frigid climates, that this disease or this, I'm not going to call it a disease, let's just call it this gene was produced, and it changed people. Now, this gene is basically called OCA1 and OCA2. It's oculocutaneous albinism. Albinism 1, albinism 2, oculocutaneous. Now, we can see that albinism exists in animals. Everybody have seen albino crocodiles or albino gorillas, albino tigers. It's albino animals all over the place. But we know completely well that we have albino humans. Now, this is going to be hard for a lot of people to accept, but it's the one that fits and it makes the most sense, and science backs it up, and we're going to go through it. And to me, after you see this, it's just like really completely obvious. So now, oculocutaneous 1 is a severe case of albinism. Now, its prototypical traits are basically white skin, blonde hair, and gray eyes. Now, in severe cases, the eyesight could become diminished, or the person could become blind with OCA1. Now, oculocutaneous 2 is the more common form of albinism, and its prototypical traits are blonde hair or red hair, blue eyes or green eyes or gray eyes. Where do we find these traits at? We find them in white people. But here is the kicker. Albinism, oculocutaneous 2, oculocutaneous 1 is found in every single race of people on the face of the earth. That is the kicker. Why is that the kicker? Because we can trace it all the way back to African people. So this is proof positive that this is the source. So if you are not my son, I can't pass something down to you. So you come from me. It is hereditary. And the fact that these Africans in this area who have albinism, who have OCA1 and OCA2, the fact that these people have never left Africa, they have never been out in the world and seen and experienced the rest of the world. A lot of these tribes have never left. They have always been here. So how could they affect the rest of the world? Now, this is the Bahati tribe in Pakistan. Have you ever seen an albino Pakistani? Here you go. Look at the hair. You have red hair. You have blonde hair. These people are everywhere. This is albinism. This is where this white race comes from. But we're going to go into it further. If you ain't convinced yet, you will be. So now understand, this is going to be hard for a lot of people to accept. I know a lot of people are not going to want to agree with it, and a lot of people are going to feel some type of way about what I'm going to say. But understand, OCA1 and OCA2 is caused by a defect or a deficit in the production of melanin and the absence of pigmentation in the skin. So now think about nature. Nature gives you what you need. Nature does not make mistakes. So why is it that black people have so much melanin? Why are we so dark? Because we were created in Africa, and Africa is hot and the sun is highly exposed there. So nature says that, okay, I have to give you something to protect you from this sun. Thus, melanin. This is why we have so much of it. So now let's take this thing back to nature. Let's think about the people that got trapped in this ice age. Think about when a woman became pregnant. Now, when a woman gives birth, this is nature at work. This is a natural event. This is the work of the creator or the work of God. Now, what did the ancient Egyptians call God? They call them Neterus, or they call them Netchers. This is where we get the word nature, because they believe that the woman was God. That's why we call it Mother Nature. So now, you cannot get a man from a man. You can't get a woman from a man, but you can get a man and a woman from a woman, because the woman is the creator. This is why they believe that the black woman was God, because the black woman, being the original woman, would be the original God. This is not to take anything away from white women. Let's not pretend like they can't give birth or they can't have babies. They are gods as well. They come from black women. But black woman being the original woman, she's the original God. So now, let's look at nature here. Let's think about nature. Forget all the bull. Nature is saying, wait a minute. We are not in Africa no more. It's not hot here. So we have to conform to this atmosphere, to this temperature, to this climate. So nature is saying with this baby in the womb that we need to change. So now nature's saying We don't need this kinky hair. We need longer hair. We need hair to protect our ears from the cold, to protect our face and neck. We don't need this broad nose. We need a thinner nose because we don't want to be inhaling all this cold air going to the brain. We don't need thick lips. We don't need the skin complexion. We don't need all this melanin because it's not so much sun here that's going to damage us. This is nature. Nature made this change, and in doing so, it created OCA1 and OCA2. And this is the truth, whether you want to accept it or not. Put away all the emotional bullcrap. Put away all the history. Put away your personal feelings about black people and white people and accept the truth. This is what's taking place. It is a natural thing. This is nature. Now, had these people stayed in this cold, frigid temperature, this wouldn't be a problem. Had they stayed in this cold climate, this wouldn't be an issue. They would just have changed and adapted and evolved with the climate. Now, as I said, oculocutaneous 1 is a severe case of albinism. Oculocutaneous 2, or OCA2, is the more common form of albinism. But just like in genetics, when you trace something back to patient 0 will basically have different traits of this disease or this, mutation. You'll be able to find something different inside patient 0 that will point to patient 0 being the initial carrier or the originator of this specific mutation or disease. So I told you about OCA1 and OCA2, but there exists OCA3 and OCA4. Now, OCA3 and OCA4 can only be found in black people. That is the dagger, whether you realize it or not. Now, don't get me wrong, OCA4 can be found in Japanese people as well, but that's about it. But OCA3 is only found in African people. So, if the African race is not the father and the mother, then every other race could not have oculocutaneous. And because they are the father and mother, we can see that the genetics inside them is different and capable of producing OCA3 and OCA4, and no other race is able to produce OCA3 except for African people. Yet, every single race is affected by OCA. This proves, whether you want to accept it or not, that they are patient 0. They are the father and the mother Africans. So now the difference with OCA3, which only affects African people, is they have reddish brown skin, or they have ginger or red hair, and they have brown or hazel irises. And this is how you can tell who has OCA3 specifically, because they'll have like white skin with like these brown or reddish freckles. This is where your freckles come from when you see that red freckles all over the albino skin or in white people's skin. It produces these freckles. Now, what else can we see that has the same kind of characteristics as OCA1 or oculocutaneous 1, 2, 3, 4? That's vitiligo. We see vitiligo every single day. People see it all the time. And it's the same symptoms as OCA 1, 2, 3, 4. It's vitiligo, except that oculocutaneous happens within the womb. You are born albino. Vitiligo happens when you come out black and you start to turn white. Now, this is proof positive. I mean, come on. Put everything aside. Put all the hate aside and witness the truth. You can see it for yourself. Look at these people. Look at the skin. You can't tell me this didn't come from this. Look at them. Half black, half white. Spots of white all over them. Look at these people. This is where your white race comes from. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, wait a minute. They don't look exactly like white people. They look a lot more paler. Now, we have all seen some super pale people out there, and you can't seriously tell a difference when you look at these pale people who are considered white people and these people who are considered albinos. But understand this was thousands of years ago. So understand, once these albinos started to mate with black people, so what's going to happen when an albino mates with a black person? They get together, they have a baby, they're going to produce a light baby, but that baby's going to have a little bit of darkness to it. It's going to be brown or really light brown. Now, what if this now light brown or mixed baby has a baby by another albino? How's that baby going to turn out? That baby is going to look more lighter. And what if that baby has a baby with another albino? Then that baby's going to come out white, but have some kind of darkness to it. It's going to give you the features that these white people possess today. So understand, you can have white people in your genes or white blood in your blood right now today and look as dark as me. Because let's say your great whoever grandfather had a baby with a white woman or a white man. So they had a baby, that baby came out light. Now, if that baby keeps producing black or mating with black all the way up to you, you will not find a trace of whiteness in you. You won't be able to see it. It probably will not show up. You will be, look as dark as me, but down the line, you could have a, super white great grandmother or grandfather. It's the same thing vice versa. If a black person and a white person have a baby and that baby comes out light, but then that light baby mates with a white person, and then they'll have a lighter baby, and then that baby grows up, mates with another white person, so on and so forth. The result will be eventually just this white man. No traits or no characteristics, or I shouldn't say characteristics, but no signs that there's some black in that DNA somewhere, because it has been bombarded with all of this, albinism, and it kind of covers up and, knocks out the black DNA, because you have so many traces of DNA from albinos or from white people. So, I mean, these are ways that we can just look at this and see how, the little subtle difference from an albino to a white person can appear. It's just genetics. It's just how things come to be. It's nature. It's not nothing that you can look at and say, well, it's a clear, distinct difference. This is like right in your face, obvious. I mean, look at the pictures. Look at these people. Some of these people you can look at and you can't tell, if this is albino or if this is like, people who we call white today, who basically are albinos, if you didn't understand, that's what I'm trying to say now. But look at the pictures. Look, you can't tell if some of these people are albino as we consider them, or just regular white people as we consider them. Just look at them. This is proof right here. Look at the pictures. Look at these people. You see it all the time. You cannot tell a difference. They have red lips, just like white people have red lips. They produce the same color. Now, the thing is, albino, when it mates with albino, will only produce albino. But black, when we mate with anything, we're gonna show up. When we produce with white, we're gonna show up. We produce with Asian, we're gonna show up. But white and white will only make white. Albino and albino will only make albino, and that's the way it is. So now you also have to take into account, the race mixing that would happen during exploration. When these groups and when these tribes was getting up and they was, going across the lands, and when they was just going out to find food, and they was, just going out exploring, they would run into all kinds of people. You have the albino Komi people. You have those people that's in the Nordic area. You also have the Samoyed people that's in Siberia, in northern Russia. The Samoyed people, that's what the dog is named after. The Sami people who I was talking about earlier. Then you have the Dravidian people, the people who speak the Dravidian language, who will also be producing albinos. I mean, it's just so many different races of people producing people, albino people. And these albinos would meet at some point and come together. And when an albino has an albino, you're going to get another albino. But you have to think about the difference that let's say a Dravidian albino and a Samoyed albino, when they come together, what they would produce versus, an African albino and let's just say a Sami, one of the Sami people, one of the albinos from those tribes. So it's so many different ways you can put this stuff together. We got to think about thousands and thousands of years of people bumping into each other and, running into different tribes during exploration that's going to produce all different kinds of people. But then you also have to take into account that at some point, yes, maybe the albino people felt left out. They felt different, and maybe they formed different tribes, which they did. And they came together in different groups, I should say. So then you have like albinos with red hair, albinos with white hair. I mean, you can just look at the situation back then and think, if I produce this albino baby, imagine the first woman who had this albino baby, how she must have freaked out. This baby's white, what the hell is going on? So some of these people in different tribes, it's sad to say, probably was not, looked at, favorably. They probably was shunned away. And they probably end up, as they got older, just trying to find people who look like them and wanting to be around each other. So this is some of the things we got to look at so many different races producing albino people. But the originator, you have to understand, is the African. So as I was saying, how nature basically produces conducive to its environment. So you would think that Australopithecus would be different based on the part of the world that you live in. So we know, for instance, that people in Ireland have red hair. People in Europe, or Europeans, blonde hair, blue eyes. So you have to think that the original Africans that started out in Ireland and in Europe, once they start having albino babies with, red hair, blonde hair, blue eyes, then think about the people in the Nordic that look like more Asian, more Mongoloid. So these people, when they came down and started to mate with these now albino red hair or albino white, blonde hair, blue eyes, they will produce a different type of, person, or white person. They will look different. So when we look at the Nanette people or the Samoyed people of today, we can see that today they look more Caucasian, they look more white. But we know that at some point you had albinos mating with the indigenous people of the Samoyed tribe who look more Mongoloid or more Asian. So when you look at the skull type of the Samoyed people and Nanette people of today, we can see they have more of a wider face and flat face, more than you would see a typical Caucasian. Now the whole thing is, when you look at an Asian skull, which is also known as brachycephalic. Brachycephalic skulls are flat.